Hello and welcome to part 2 in this series, where we look further at this English word rapture, this word rapture that we use in the church. This word rapture that is an English word that existed in the 16th century, the 17th century, the 18th century, used in literature. In the last video, we saw what the dictionary speaks about this English word rapture. We looked at dictionary.com and what it says about this English word rapture. We saw the following. We saw how it, number one, means an ecstatic joy or delight, a joyful ecstasy. Number two, often raptures an utterance or expression of ecstatic delight. There is something amazing about this word ecstatic, ecstasy, ecstatic, this delight. Number three, the carrying of a person to another place or another sphere of existence. And you're going to enjoy this video because we're going to look at this word ecstatic, this word ecstasy. We're going to see where it comes from in the Greek. I want to show you what the English word rapture is in the Greek. When we look at the English word rapture, and we looked at how it relates to being excited and ecstasy, guess what? The Greek word is Ecstasy. Ecstasy is the equivalent to this English word rapture that we have. That's right. Rapture, which we looked at earlier in the dictionary, it means an ecstatic joy or delight. It means a joyful ecstasy. It means ecstatic delight. It's that Greek word ecstasy. And guess what this Greek word ecstasy is? I want to show you what this Greek word ecstasy is. It means this: an ecstasy in which the mind is for a time carried, as it were, out of or beyond itself, and lost. Great astonishment, great amazement. That's one of the meanings of this Greek word ecstasy. It means an ecstasy in which the mind is for a time carried, as it were, out of or beyond itself and lost. It means great astonishment, a great amazement. Number two, it means a trance. It means a sacred ecstasy or rapture of the mind beyond itself when the use of the external senses are suspended and God reveals something in a peculiar manner. This is quite amazing because this Greek word ecstasy is used in various places in the New Testament. It relates to Peter when he fell in trance and he was then shown things by God. He saw and he heard things. He was moved to another dimension. We see that the same thing happened to Paul as well. And he saw and he heard things from God while he was ecstasy, while he was in rapture, while he was in that trance, while he was taken to another location. The Thayer's definition of ecstasy is this: it means any casting down of a thing from its proper place or estate. It means a displacement, to be moved from one location to another. Number two, it means a throwing of the mind out of its normal state, an alienation of mind, whether such as makes a lunatic, or that a man who by some sudden emotion is transported, as it were, out of himself, so that in this rapt condition, in this rapture condition, although he is awake, his mind is drawn off from all surrounding objects and wholly fixed on things divine, that he sees nothing but the forms and images lying within, and thinks that he perceives with his bodily eyes and ears realities shown him by God. This is what happened with Peter. This is what happened with Paul. Paul was taken to the third heaven. And Paul said he did not know whether it was in the spirit or in the flesh, but he was taken and shown things in heaven that were unspeakable. This is this ecstasis. This is where the harpazo takes place, a being seized and moved from one location to another. It is an amazement, the state of one who, either owing to the importance of the novelty of an event, is thrown into a state of blended fear and also wonderment. Rapture is ecstasis. The English word which corresponds to ecstasis is rapture, but not in its exact sense as the act of seizing and carrying away, which would literally correspond to the Greek word harpazo, that verb harpazo, which means to seize, take by force, or catch away or upward. Harpazo and the verb harpazo are used transiently, while ekstasis and the verb existemi are used as a reaction of the mind to an external cause or an internal feeling. That's why when people are sad and they hear other people singing, suddenly in their mind they move to another place and they start to become very joyful, very ecstatic, very ekstasis. It is not by being oneself, but as it were, one standing outside himself. We see that ekstasis, we see that rapture means to be seized and moved from one location to another. We read of Peter being ekstasis. We read of Peter being raptured. We read of this in Acts chapter 10, verses 10 and 11. It says this: he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, Peter fell into a trance. And guess what? In this trance that Peter fell into, this trance that he was moved into, he saw heaven opened, and he saw a certain vessel descending down to Peter, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth. This is what happens in an ecstasis. This is what's happening in a rapture moment, where you are seized and moved from where you are to another location, and then you see and hear things. We read of this again further on, where Peter repeats this later in Acts 11, verses 4 and 5. Peter rehearsed the matter from the beginning and expounded it by order to them, saying, I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I saw a vision, a certain vessel descend, as it had been a great sheet let down from heaven by four corners, and it came to me. Rapture is this Greek word ekstasis, and it virtually means to be seized and moved, whether it be in the body or the flesh or the spirit or in the mind or in the emotions, but taken to a different place. Taken to a different place. And in this case, Peter fell into a trance. He saw a vision. He saw and he heard, and what it was in this vision came from heaven all the way down to where he was. We saw that Paul also has the same ekstasis, the same rapture, the same being in a trance. Acts 22, 17 and 18. It came to pass that when I was come to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, I was in ekstasis, and saw him saying to me, saw Jesus saying to Paul, make haste, get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. So in this rapture moment, Paul hears and he sees Jesus. He encounters Jesus. Paul was in a trance, and in that trance he was seized, he was moved, he came to that place where he saw Jesus, he heard Jesus, there was this discussion taking place. To be seized and moved is ekstasis. To be seized and moved is rapture. The similarities between the word rapture, the English word rapture, and the Greek word ekstasis is profound. Rapture and ekstasis is all about being moved, moved in one's body, moved in one's mind, moved in one's emotions, moved in one's feelings. It's all about being seized and moved. Peter was moved to see what God wanted him to see. Paul was moved to see what God wanted him to see. Look at the comparisons. On the left we had the English word rapture. We saw the following. It means an ecstatic joy or delight, a joyful ecstasy. Often raptures, an utterance or expression of ecstatic delight. And on the right-hand side we see the description of ekstasis, which is an ecstasy in which the mind is for a time carried, as it were, out of or beyond itself and lost in a great astonishment and amazement. A trance that is sacred ecstasy or rapture of the mind beyond itself, when the use of the external senses are suspended and God reveals something in a peculiar manner. When Peter was seized and moved in that rapture moment, when he fell into a trance, he saw and he heard God. When Paul, when he was seized and moved and fell into that trance, he heard and saw and encountered Jesus. This ekstasis, this rapture, is of a man who by some sudden emotion is transported, as it were, out of himself. So in this rapture condition, although he is awake, his mind is drawn off from all the surrounding objects where he was, and now he is fixed on what God is saying, what God is doing. He sees and he hears God. There is still so much more to this English word rapture. And that is the Latin word for rapture. That is the Latin equivalent that is used. And you'll start to see where we get this word rapture from and why we use this word rapture when we are speaking about us being seized and moved to meet Jesus. What word is used in the Latin Vulgate Bible we're going to be looking at? You will be amazed. There are Latin words in the Bible that refer to being seized and moved from one location to another, and we see that R-A-P, that rap. We see that in the words. The rapiuma is one of the words. Raptura is another word. There's different words that you will see in the Latin. So I hope this has blessed you. I hope it gives you a greater understanding, even more, of this English word rapture and the Greek word ekstasis. And in the next video we're going to look at the Latin words. We're going to see how the Latin Vulgate Bible gives us great insight into why we use this word rapture. Why we use the word rapture when we are speaking of Jesus gathering us together to meet him at his coming. Thank you.